The heavy mahogany doors of the West Wing closed with a dull thud behind Vice President J.D. Vance. The sound echoed through the empty corridor, matching the hollow feeling in his chest. Outside, rain pelted against the windows, droplets racing down the glass like tears. The soft yellow light of his office lamp cast long shadows across the room as he slumped into his leather chair. It had been 15 days since the president had spoken to him directly. 15 days of avoided glances, canceled meetings, and whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when he entered rooms. The tension between them hung in the White House like a toxic cloud, invisible but suffocating. Vance loosened his tie, the silk fabric rough against his fingertips. The document that had caused this rift sat on his desk, its white edges gleaming under the lamplight. A policy proposal he had drafted without the president's knowledge, a bold plan for economic reform that contradicted Trump's established agenda. "What have I done?" he whispered to the empty room. His phone buzzed, the screen illuminating with a text from his chief of staff. "CNN has it. They're running the story in 30 minutes. Vance's heart hammered against his ribs. The leaked document, their private disagreement. Now the whole world would know about the growing divide between the president and his vice president. He closed his eyes, remembering Trump's words from their last real conversation. "You're either with me or against me, JD. There is no middle ground." What happened next would change American politics forever. If you're finding this story intriguing, make sure to hit the subscribe button now. You won't want to miss what's coming next, and we share powerful stories like this every week that reveal the truth behind Washington's closed doors. The morning headlines screamed across every news channel. Vice President at odds with President, leaked documents reveal major policy rift. Inside the private dining room of the White House, President Donald Trump slammed his palm against the polished table, causing the crystal water glasses to jump. His face flushed crimson, veins pulsing at his temples. "Get him in here, now!" he demanded, his voice like gravel. Secret Service agents exchanged glances, their earpieces buzzing with activity. Outside the room, staffers scurried away, their footsteps quick and nervous against the marble floor. 3 minutes later, J.D. Vance stood at the doorway. His tailored suit couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. The room felt charged, like the air before a lightning strike. "You went behind my back," Trump said, his voice dangerously quiet. He didn't look up from the newspaper spread before him. Vance stepped forward, his shoes sinking into the plush carpet. "Sir, I never intended for that document to—" "To what?" Trump interrupted, finally looking up. His blue eyes were ice cold. "To undermine everything we've built? To make us look divided? To set yourself up for 2028? The accusation hung in the air between them. "That's not what this was about," Vance replied, his voice steady despite the churning in his stomach. "This country is facing an economic crisis unlike anything we've seen. My proposal offers a different approach, one I believe could—" "I don't care what you believe." Trump's fist crashed down again. "We present a united front. Always, that was our agreement." Outside the window, a flock of birds scattered from a nearby tree, startled by some unseen threat. Inside, the tension thickened. "The American people deserve honest leadership," Vance said, his words careful but firm. "Even when that means respectful disagreement." Trump laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that cut through the room. "Respectful? You call this respectful?" He held up the newspaper, shaking it. "Every outlet in the country is running with this. Trump-Vance administration fracturing. Vice President challenges President's economic vision." He stood up slowly, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the table. "You've created a problem, JD. A big problem." Vance didn't back down. "Sometimes progress requires difficult conversations, Mr. President." Trump's eyes narrowed. "Get out," he said quietly. "We'll finish this discussion later. I need to think." As Vance turned to leave, Trump added, "And clear your schedule for the next 3 days. No public appearances, no statements. Nothing until we resolve this." The door closed behind him with finality. In the hallway, staffers averted their eyes as he passed. His phone buzzed continuously in his pocket. Reporters, advisors, friends all wanting answers. But the biggest question remained unanswered. How would they move forward from here? The rift between the two most powerful men in America was now public knowledge, and the political vultures were already circling. What no one knew was that both men had already set plans in motion that would shock the nation. Thunder rumbled outside as J.D. Vance sat alone in his private office at the Naval Observatory. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly, counting down to what felt like an inevitable confrontation. His security detail had been doubled, not for his protection, but to monitor his movements. A soft knock at the door broke his concentration. "Come in," he called, expecting another aide with more bad news. Instead, Sarah Mitchell entered, her face grave. As the president's most trusted advisor, her presence here was unexpected and concerning. "The president sent you?" Vance asked, standing. Sarah shook her head, closing the door quietly behind her. "Number, he doesn't know I'm here." She hesitated, her fingers twisting the pearl necklace at her throat. "What I'm about to tell you, it could end my career." Vance gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit down, Sarah." "There's no time," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain drumming against the windows. "The president is planning to ask for your resignation tomorrow. Publicly." The words hit him like a physical blow. "On what grounds?" "Disloyalty. Undermining the administration." She swallowed hard. "He's already discussing replacements." Vance's mind raced. The Constitution provided no mechanism for a president to remove his vice president, but a public call for resignation would create an untenable situation. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, studying her face. "Because what's happening isn't right," she said, her eyes meeting his directly. "And because there's something else you should know." She pulled a small flash drive from her pocket and placed it on his desk. "These are private recordings from the Oval Office. The president discussing your economic proposal." "How did you get this?" "That doesn't matter." Her hand trembled slightly. "What matters is what's on it." "He agrees with you, J.D. Privately, he admits your approach is better, but publicly, he can't back down because it would make him look weak." Vance stared at the flash drive, the small device suddenly seeming to carry the weight of the world. "Politics over people," he murmured. "Always has been," Sarah replied. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Before he could answer, his phone rang. The president's direct line. Sarah's eyes widened. "I should go," she said, moving toward the door. "Sarah," Vance called after her. "Thank you." She paused, her hand on the doorknob. "I didn't do this for you. I did it for the country." After she left, Vance stared at the ringing phone, each shrill tone demanding a decision. Finally, he picked up. "Mr. President." "My office. 1 hour." Trump's voice was tight, controlled. "And J.D.? Come alone." The line went dead. Vance looked at the flash drive, then at his reflection in the rain-streaked window. His father's words from long ago echoed in his mind. "When the moment comes to stand for something, you'll know it." This was that moment. But as he placed the flash drive in his pocket and prepared to face the president, he had no way of knowing that across Washington, forces were already in motion that would change everything. The true conflict wasn't between him and Trump at all. It was something much bigger, something that would require them to set aside their differences in a way no one could have predicted. And when that revelation came, it would leave the entire nation speechless. The hallway to the Oval Office seemed longer than usual, each step heavy with consequence. Secret Service agents flanked J.D. Vance, their expressions unreadable behind dark sunglasses despite the late hour. Outside, lightning flashed, momentarily illuminating the Rose Garden, where reporters huddled under umbrellas, hungry for any sign of the administration's internal strife. Vance's hand closed around the flash drive in his pocket. It felt hot, dangerous, a small piece of plastic and metal that could destroy careers or save them, including his own. The Oval Office doors opened. President Trump stood at the window, his back to the door, a silhouette against the stormy night. He didn't turn as Vance entered. "Close the door," Trump said, his voice oddly subdued. Vance nodded to the agents, who stepped back, allowing the heavy doors to shut. The sound echoed with finality. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The only sound was the persistent drumming of rain against the bulletproof glass and the soft ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. "You know why you're here," Trump finally said, still facing the window. "To tender my resignation," Vance replied evenly. Now Trump turned, his face illuminated by a flash of lightning. But instead of anger, his expression held something else. Exhaustion, perhaps. Or resignation of his own. "Is that what you think?" Trump asked. "It's what I've been told to expect." Trump moved to his desk, picking up a remote control. The television on the wall flickered to life, showing CNN. The news anchor's voice filled the room. "Breaking news. Federal authorities have arrested Senator William Harrington on charges of conspiracy and espionage. Sources claim the senator has been working with foreign entities to destabilize U.S. financial markets." Vance's breath caught. Harrington had been one of the loudest voices criticizing both him and the president over their economic policies. "Turn around," Trump said quietly. Confused, Vance complied. On the credenza behind him sat an open laptop, its screen showing a series of emails and financial transactions, all tied to Harrington and several other key figures in Congress. "They've been working together for months," Trump continued, "deliberately sabotaging economic recovery efforts. Your proposal threatened to expose their scheme." Vance's mind raced. "You knew?" "Not everything. Not at first." Trump sank into his chair. "But enough to start looking deeper. The leak of your document accelerated their timeline. So our public disagreement was exactly what they wanted," Trump finished. "A distracted administration is easier to manipulate." Vance pulled the flash drive from his pocket. "Then you should see this." Trump eyed the device. "What is it?" "Proof that despite our public differences, we're actually working toward the same goal." Vance placed it on the desk. "And maybe a way forward." Trump's expression changed, something unreadable passing across his features. Then unexpectedly, he smiled. Not his public smile for cameras, but something genuine. "Sit down, JD," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "We have work to do." Hours later, as dawn broke over Washington, the two men emerged from the Oval Office, shoulder to shoulder. Outside, a sea of reporters waited, cameras flashing like strobe lights. The rain had stopped, and the morning sun broke through the clouds, casting everything in a golden light. The president approached the impromptu gathering first, Vice President Vance half a step behind him. The press corps fell silent, sensing something momentous. "Ladies and gentlemen," Trump began, his voice strong and clear. "Last night, Vice President Vance and I made a decision that will change the course of our administration, and we believe, the future of our great nation." He turned to Vance, nodding slightly. It was a gesture no one expected, the president deferring to his vice president. Vance stepped forward, his face composed but his eyes alive with purpose. "What began as a difference of opinion has evolved into something much more important. A recognition that the challenges facing America require new thinking, bold action, and above all, unity of purpose." As cameras clicked and reporters scribbled frantically, Vance outlined a new economic framework, one that merged his approach with the president's, creating something entirely new. It was revolutionary, unexpected, and immediately captivating. Trump returned to the microphone. "Today marks a new chapter, not just for this administration, but for how government can and should work." What happened next left everyone present, hardened reporters, cynical staffers, and millions watching at home, completely speechless. The joint press conference continued, but now President Trump did something unprecedented. He placed his hand on Vice President Vance's shoulder and said words no one ever expected to hear. "I was wrong, and JD was right." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. The President of the United States, known for never admitting error, had just publicly acknowledged a mistake. "This isn't about ego," Trump continued, his voice steady. "It's about what works for the American people. And sometimes the best ideas come from those willing to risk everything to speak truth to power." Cameras flashed furiously, capturing a moment that would be studied in political science classes for generations to come. Vance stepped forward again. "What we're announcing today isn't just a new economic policy, it's a new approach to leadership." He gestured to a group of people emerging from the White House, a diverse collection of economists, business leaders, and community representatives from across the political spectrum. These Americans have helped us craft a framework that transcends partisanship, Vance explained, because the challenges we face don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal. The president nodded. For too long, Washington has been paralyzed by division. We fight each other while the American people suffer. He paused, looking directly into the cameras. Today, that changes. What followed was a masterclass in collaborative leadership. For the next 30 minutes, Trump and Vance alternated speaking, each building on the other's points, demonstrating a united front that seemed impossible just 24 hours earlier. They announced the formation of an economic recovery coalition, bringing together leaders from both parties. They outlined a comprehensive plan that combined tax incentives for businesses with enhanced support for working families. And most surprisingly, they admitted the flaws in their previous approaches. As the press conference concluded, a reporter shouted one final question. How can you two work together so seamlessly after such public disagreement? The two men exchanged glances. Then Vance spoke, his voice resonating with conviction. Because we remembered something essential, something America itself needs to remember. True strength isn't about never changing your mind. It's about having the courage to change when the facts demand it. Trump added, and true leadership isn't about always being right. It's about putting the people you serve above your own pride. The crowd fell silent, absorbing words that seemed to cut through years of political cynicism like a shaft of sunlight through storm clouds. Later that evening, as networks across America replayed the historic press conference, political analysts struggled to make sense of what they'd witnessed. How had such a public rift transformed into such a powerful alliance? What did it mean for the future of American politics? But in living rooms across the country, ordinary Americans weren't analyzing. They were feeling something many hadn't felt in years when watching their leaders. Hope. In J.D. Vance's private office, as midnight approached, he stood at the window looking out at the Washington Monument illuminated against the night sky. His phone buzzed with a text message from the president. We did good today, tomorrow we do better. A soft knock at his door announced his chief of staff, carrying the evening newspapers. The headlines told the story. Unprecedented unity, Trump and Vance rewrite the rules of politics. White House tension transforms into revolutionary partnership. America speechless as leaders choose country over ego. Sir, his chief of staff said, the response has been overwhelming. People are calling it a turning point. Vance nodded, thinking of the journey that had brought him here, from the heated argument in the private dining room to the flash drive that changed everything, to the moment of truth in the Oval Office. Do you think it will last? His chief of staff asked. Vance considered the question. That depends on whether we remember the lesson. Which is? Vance smiled, looking back at the monument gleaming in the distance, a reminder of another time when divided leaders found common purpose. That the most powerful words in leadership aren't, I'm right or you're wrong, he said quietly. They're, we can do better. As the story of the Trump-Vance transformation spread across America in the days that followed, something remarkable happened. In state houses and city councils, in corporate boardrooms and community meetings, people began to approach conflicts differently, asking not, how can I win this argument, but how can we find a better way forward together? It wasn't perfect, it wasn't universal, but it was a start. And it all began with a moment of tension that could have torn two leaders apart, but instead forged a bond that left everyone speechless. If this story moved you, if it made you think about how we can all approach disagreements differently, don't just watch and move on. Share this video with someone who needs to hear its message. Leave a comment telling us about a time when finding common ground changed everything. And subscribe to our channel for more stories that go beyond the headlines to the heart of what matters. Because in a world that profits from our division, choosing unity is the most powerful statement we can make. Thank you for watching.